A couple of days ago, and I'm sure many of you have been seeing many articles float around the internet, Warner Brothers is looking for a fat payday to outsource some of their content to other production companies. This really shows how broke and desperate Warner Brothers is, and honestly, how much more life this company really has. I've been thinking about the future of Warner Brothers, but primarily DC. Where does DC go from here? How does their content change? What will the future movies and shows look like? What, as fans or general audiences, are we in store for? Now, before I give my opinion, which is probably a very unpopular opinion, but regardless, it's how I feel and it's what I'm gonna say to you all, let's read a little bit of this article first, primarily because I think a lot of people are seeing the headline of the article, but they're not really digging deep into the article. Now, the article's not long. I'm not going to read it all. There's just a couple of things I want to read and point out. So first of all, they're looking for a $500 million payday to outsource TV and movie music publication assets. So this would mean another production company for their movies and TV shows would be capable of using already created music from Warner Brothers Productions in their own productions. While it is unclear exactly which assets are on the table, one source says that the rights to slightly less than half of the catalog, with a price of around $500 million, are likely going to a major label, with Sony said to be in the lead. Of all companies to be dealing with, I'm not a huge fan of Sony's movie department, but I guess when you are Warner Brothers and you're looking for the highest bid, you will take anything you can get right now. It also goes on to say that the music catalog being offered are coming from some of Warner Brothers' most popular films, such as several Batman movies. You could be in a situation where you're watching some sort of Sony movie, whether it be an original IP or something to do with Spider-Man, and all of a sudden you're hearing some classics from Hans Zimmer, like Watch the World Burn or A Watchful Guardian, and either it's the full out song or they're just sampling it in some capacity. Some observers cast a skeptical eye on the deal, saying that many of the company's assets are more than half a century old and are declining in value and difficult to exploit. They are said to consist largely of film themes and cues, with comparatively few conventional songs that would seem to have little familiarity or resonance in the present or future. The catalog is currently under a multi-year administration deal with Universal Music Publishing. Universal, I've been saying it a lot. Warner Brothers DC might go to Universal one day. I know this is just music, but they were mentioned. Very interesting, though, how these insiders or observers are casting a little bit of doubt on the deal. What is being offered, what is being contracted out, is a little too old for modern day and might not attract to modern day audiences. The windfall from such a sale, coming at the top of a still booming market for music catalogs, would help the company to pay down a $49.5 billion debt. Yeah, all right. 500 million taken away from 49.5 billion. Now, I'm sure there is some deal in this contract that would state if you use any of these products that we are selling, when you bring it to theaters, streaming platforms, whatever it may be, Warner Brothers has to get a certain percentage of the sales. Whatever money it makes, Warner Brothers has to at least make a little bit. So like I said, this shows how desperate for money Warner Brothers is right now. And a couple days ago, I released a video about how The Flash has bombed and how this is not just terrible for DC, but this is terrible for Warner Brothers. I had a couple of people who did not like what I had to say in that video, and to be honest with you, I frankly don't care, because what I say I believe to be the truth, and that's just how I see things. Warner Brothers is in some serious financial crisis, and they are in some serious fundamental problems within the workings of their company. And if you don't think that people within Warner Brothers have talked about the viability of their company and have talked about the future of their company, the future of DC, if it's all going to come crashing down, how safe these jobs are going to be moving forward, if you don't think they've had those conversations behind closed doors, well, I don't know what to tell you, because this simply proves they have. Now, in one instance, you could sit here and just say, well, you know, it's just music. Who cares? They're just pawning off some music so that another company can give them a sizable payday and give them interest on whatever they decide to use, and then that company can use certain music or certain things as sound bites and samples. It's not that big of a deal. It's a smart play by Warner Brothers. Yeah, it's a smart play by a company who is in dire debt and needs any help they possibly can. And the way I see it is, if you're already going down a road where you're willing to send off some musical creations for $500 million, when does this stop? Does it ever stop, I think, is actually more of an accurate question. When does the time come where they possibly decide to say, hey, would Netflix be interested in having Game of Thrones on their streaming platform all 8 seasons? Could we get a solid amount of money if Netflix was to house that for us for a little while? Especially if this is where you're going to start. It's not like this will solve all their problems. They're probably gonna have to go to a certain point where they are featuring their own content on other company streaming channels who have no part in creating the content with Warner Brothers. I mean, whether you like it or not, or think it's even possible in the slightest, this 100% did fuel some fire to people who want Zack Snyder's world still continued on Netflix, because in a way, it does show that Warner Brothers is certainly interested in outsourcing their product for a payday to pay off their what seems to be impossible debt. So simply put, if they're interested in doing this, what else are they possibly interested in outsourcing? What this has also done is it has sparked the conversation of simply, how is the new DCU going to be able to be funded? Unless every single project moving forward has a budget of under $80 million, where are they going to get the money to invest into some of these really important high-class films like a Superman movie? I can only imagine the Superman film is going to need a $200 million budget. They are struggling to even make $200 million in the box office for one film. And even if they were to make $200 million in the box office, that doesn't all just go to Warner Brothers. They still gotta pay certain companies and people with some of their box office funds. If you look at the box office income from all DC films, from Man of Steel all the way up until recently The Flash, I believe it is only Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman who have an opening weekend of over $100 million. All the other DC films have opened up to about 60, 50, maybe even 40 million in its opening weekend. And then when it comes to its overall box office, what it did in its lifespan in the theaters, Man of Steel was about 670 million. Batman vs Superman, I believe, was about 870 million. I'm forgetting Wonder Woman right now. I'm pretty sure it was solid. You even had Suicide Squad, which managed to hit over 700 million. And then, of course, you have Aquaman, which hit over 1 billion. We can use any excuse we want on why some of those movies maybe didn't hit a billion, or maybe didn't hit the income that certain people were expecting them to hit. The one thing we can't argue is that no matter the excuse we use, they all made more money than every single DC film that has come out since Aquaman. All those movies I just mentioned made more money, and that's just the simple truth. DC has almost created a trend for themselves that if they can hit 300 million worldwide, that's a good thing. Like, oh my God, DC and Warner Brothers had a successful film. They made 300 million worldwide, whereas some of their budgets are encroaching to $250 million. At that point, for it to be a success, I believe you would need upwards of $550, $600 million, and DC movies have simply not been doing that. It is, of course, too early to judge how well James Gunn's box office is going to do with his Superman film or whatever movie is possibly made after that movie. Like I've stated, I think this brand is far too damaged to expect a lot of people to go to the movies to see a new DC reboot. I don't think enough people care right now, and a 1-year break until 2025 where we get the reboot, I still just don't think it's enough time at all. And then when you couple that with the fact that this company is flat out broke, there is simply just a lot of doubt in my mind. I also think what those numbers do tell you is that with DC, people are looking for something a little bit different than they are with Marvel. With DC, we were never looking for an MCU 2.0. We all know that when you come to DC, we expect things to be a little more darker or a little more adult, if you will. When you look at these box office numbers for past DC films, in the higher hundreds of millions or in the billions range, you have the Dark Knight trilogy, which was a profound success, the first superhero film of all time to crack 1 billion, Man of Steel, which was over 600 million, Batman vs Superman, which was over 800 million, The Batman from Matt Reeves, which was over 700 million, and then Todd Phillips' Joker, which also cracked 1 billion. The one outlier is Aquaman, and I personally think the reason why it made the money it did is for a lot of things I've mentioned before. I think people knew that the Justice League was now kicked off. They wanted to see how Aquaman would fit in a world where the Justice League exists. They wanted to see if it led up to any sort of next DC film or next Justice League film. And already in this more adult type world of DC characters, how does Aquaman use that type of mold as well? Unfortunately, that is just not what we got. And I honestly think Aquaman attracted a lot of Marvel fans over to this movie. I say this all the time, and it's one of my most favorite things to say. Aquaman is a fantastic Marvel movie made by DC. Generally, when you look at box office successes from DC, they usually come from DC films that are either darker, more adult, as I keep saying, or simply their original ideas. They are films that people can almost challenge themselves over. Not like a Marvel film where it is simply sit in the theater for 2 hours, enjoy a bag of popcorn, have fun looking at their visuals, and then you go home. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because that's just what Marvel is really good at doing. They do have some films that are really good for comic book fans and are good for film fans as well, but most of their stuff is just your generic comic book storytelling. And as much as I'm sure there are certain people who would be watching this right now and absolutely hating me for saying this, it just simply shows that a lot of people find the more uniqueness of DC much more interesting. I wonder if we could find ourselves in a situation with DC and Warner Brothers where we are back to simply Elseworlds storytelling, movies or TV shows that have nothing to do with a connected universe, They are just their own stories. And it's one thing to say something like this and say this will happen before James Gunn even makes his Superman movie, because they got no money. But something like this is definitely a very real possibility if Gunn does make his Superman movie and it just doesn't do well critically or financially or both. At one point in time, I was actually very against having Elseworld stories at the same time of having a DC connected universe. And whereas I always made the argument that for general audiences, they might get confused, I think as a fan of DC and these characters, why I didn't like it is because I was getting so tired of wanting a connected universe, and then every time we got a new big budgeted project coming from them, we found out it either A, had nothing to do with the connected universe, or B, was in the connected universe, wouldn't mention anything about the connected universe, would resemble things about the connected universe, but hey, you never know at the end of the day, maybe it's not part of the connected universe. Just complete confusion. That's why I was so tired of having this so-called connected world and Elseworld stories at the same time. But clearly, a lot of what works with DC is their not connected stuff, is their Elseworld stuff. People seem to be very interested in that. And maybe what simply needs to happen is, look, right now, a DC connected universe is just not in the cards, and it's not what maybe many people are looking for in DC right now. Would it be awesome if it could work? Yes, but it's possibly just not the time at the moment. And I keep saying that 1 year is not enough. I think DC 100% needs 5 to 6 years. They need a break. They have been trying for so long and it is just not working. And even now, moving forward with Gunn, it's still not in a great spot. You still have a huge amount of people who simply hate Gunn and will not support his world, and you have a lot of people who are simply just not interested and they don't care about a connected world for DC because it just seems to not work. Warner Brothers top executives constantly kibosh everything. It is actually interesting how I've changed my thoughts on this and now think it would be a good idea if for the next couple of years it was nothing but standalone Elseworld stories that just do not connect with one another. Take the Batman approach from Matt Reeves or Joker approach from Todd Phillips and maybe try to do that with other DC characters. I think if they were to cut down on how many movies they were making, maybe focus on one a year, rack in some money from those movies, in the next couple of years, you can then try your hand at a DC universe again. Also, too, I think DC needs out of Warner Brothers. I think they need to be free. Frankly, that is what the hashtag should be right now. We all see the hashtag fire James Gunn, hashtag sell Zack Snyder's Justice League to Netflix, hashtag boycott Warner Brothers. And that is the most accurate one, no matter what anybody tells you. The people who love Snyder, the people who love Gunn, the people who love DC, that is what we all should be pushing. It should be hashtag free DC from Warner Brothers. They have lost their chance. They've treated this company and multiple creatives with complete disrespect. They do not deserve this IP anymore. Maybe DC could actually be given to a company who has the money to make a 10-year DCU plan. But as long as they own DC, as long as they are having these financial troubles, which is not going to end anytime soon, I don't know how this is honestly going to work. This is how I feel about it. I said what I said. I know a lot of people might not like my opinion. It is what it is. And it is actually this simple as well. If James Gunn's universe does actually happen, and it does actually end up being good, I'm wrong. Simple as that. I want nothing more than just for DC to be in a good state, for it to have interesting and unique storytelling and world building, and for it just to feel different than Marvel. We can actually keep DC as a company that people can look at and say, this is something that makes good stuff. But Warner Brothers, guys, they've got to go. So now let me know in the comments down below what you think of this Warner Brothers deal and what you think could happen to Warner Brothers and DC moving forward. But that's all I got for you on this one, everyone. So until next time, I will talk to you all very soon.